Hello, friends and neighbors. Good morning or good evening or whatever it is to you. I received a question the other day from somebody who watches these videos. Do you believe that? Somebody actually watches these videos. Amazing. And the question was, why do you teach? I think it's a really good question, and I had to think about it a lot as I was preparing for this video. So I actually sat and, kangaerued it for those of you who speak Japanese. I thought about it. The answer is somewhat difficult. Originally, I started teaching Zen because my teacher, Gudo Nishijima, more or less demanded that I do. He didn't order me to teach, but he had this way of just kind of saying, "Well, I'm getting very old, and I am not able to lead the seminars every Saturday. Would you mind taking over the seminars each Saturday?" Like I'm gonna say no to that. Like he doesn't know already that I have to accept it if he puts it that way. So yeah, he asked me and I did have the option to refuse, but how am I gonna refuse? Initially I was not too happy about this because I didn't really wanna talk about Zen and make my feelings known about it or anything like that, or I didn't feel I was adequate to do this. But I started doing it. I did the Saturday afternoon lectures at the Young Buddhist Association on the campus of Tokyo University, the famous Tokyo University, which is sort of the Harvard or Yale of Japan, and Nishijima had graduated from it. So I got to be in their hallowed halls talking about Buddhism. And as I did this job, as I continued talking to people about Buddhism, I found that something interesting happened. At first, I would prepare my talks. I'd sit at home, write something out, and I didn't read it right off the paper, but, I used my notes. That was not very satisfying. And the reason it wasn't very satisfying was because I would be racing through the talk to get to all the points that I had thought of. And I wasn't necessarily bringing the audience along with me in this. So I changed my tactic and I started improvising. And this is kind of what I've done ever since. And the way I improvise is kind of highly informed by a lot of bands, rock bands, including mainly King Crimson, who I talked about in my blog recently. They kind of were trying to apply to rock and roll what jazz music had already been doing, which is they would take a song and present it and then use that song as a way to move into an improvisation. Now, the bad way to do this in rock and roll music is that you just play two chords and the guitar player or whoever, the keyboard player, somebody plays a solo over top of it. Now, if you're somebody like Frank Zappa or somebody very creative, that can be really amazing. But what King Crimson did was different. They didn't necessarily have a soloist over top of the band. They would just all improvise something. And when you do that, what you're going to get will either be really good, if the players are really good and things are gelling, or it can be just noodling in search of a plan. So I tried to apply that to my Zen teaching. And so I go in with an idea of what I'm going to talk about. I don't come in completely unprepared. I have some idea, and probably I have 3 or 4 points that I want to get across. I try to keep the number to a minimum, and then I'll start talking about those, and I'll be watching the audience to see where it's going. Not just watching them, but also kind of not watching them and feeling the vibe. It sounds very hippy dippy. But if it works right, amazing things can happen. And I will say things that I didn't know that I was thinking. Maybe I wasn't thinking them. So it's not as if I have some knowledge and I'm going out there to present this knowledge to the audience. Sometimes the insights that exist in any sort of talk I might give appear as I am talking, appear to me spontaneously as I am saying them. And I don't think this is all coming from me, because my view of the world is quite different and quite informed by this Zen nonsense, or some of you might think of it as nonsense, in that I don't think I am a separate entity who exists on a blank stage who gets to talk about whatever he wants. The audience is actually part of it. And if the audience is open and receptive, and I am open and receptive, then I can be kind of a conduit for something to come through. I don't know that that makes me special. I suppose it makes me special in some way, in the fact that not everybody can do this. Not everybody can act as a conduit for an audience. I should modify that. I think everyone is capable of doing it intrinsically. There's not people out there who are incapable and people who are capable. It's more like developing a skill. Anybody could learn to play the bass guitar, but only somebody who's been playing it for years and years can really be a master bass guitarist. And I think that's what you get with a Zen teacher, is you develop gradually this art of being able to be a conduit for something deeper than yourself. Now, this doesn't always work. I particularly remember a talk I gave somewhere in Northern California. It was not San Francisco, but it may have been Sacramento, or it may have been somewhere in Humboldt County. I remember going up there, and I did what I do, but I quickly noticed that I was facing an audience who were, at least some members, some important members it seemed, were very closed off, and they wanted to passively receive entertainment, I suppose. And I wasn't being adequately entertaining that day. What I generally do in these situations is I'll try saying something, and if I feel like it's not going anywhere, I'll see if I can come up with something else. And one of the things that I often find myself doing in these cases is that I might try to see if I can come up with something that's going to kind of shock the audience a little bit. I don't like to be a shock jock about it, but sometimes if you're facing an audience who are very numb and very passive, the only way you're going to get through to them is to say something so shocking that it slaps them in the face and wakes them out of their stupor. And this is why a lot of these shock jock type people, I won't name names because I would only get in trouble if I named some of the people, but I think it's why some of them are so successful. And why some of them can reach deeper into what they want to talk about than people who are nicer and more polite. And it's very much to do with the audience and the person speaking and the dynamic between them. So the person speaking has to be open and the audience has to be open. If this happens, great things can come out of that. I've been recording my talks the last few years in Europe, and some of them have been really good. I don't know about the recordings. I just know that when I've been there, I have felt that this other presence, this, I don't know what it is, appears. And when it appears, I try to act as its mouthpiece. And other people in the audience, if they're generous enough, if they're open enough, if they are aware enough, they will also act to bring this out. So we're all acting to bring forth something that none of us can say is ours. It belongs in a sense to all of us. So none of us can say it as ours means none of us can say it's individually my thing. It's not mine. It's not Brad's thing. It's not the guy in the audience's thing. It's something that belongs to all of us collectively. That's why I teach. So, as I said, I'll go to Europe, and sometimes last year I was there for almost 8 weeks, and giving one talk a day for almost every day of those 8 weeks. So let's say I gave 50 talks, right? No, 40, 50 some talks. And out of 50 talks, 5 or maybe generously 10 of them are ones where this happens. So it's not the majority. The majority of them are good. I'm probably sound like I'm bragging, but I'm a good enough entertainer that I can give you an hour and a half worth of Zen entertainment if you invite me to come to your place and do that. And that's fine, and that can be really nice for some people who are looking for that sort of thing. Every once in a while, maybe 20% of the time at best, 10%, 5% sometimes of the time, I'll lock into something. We, the audience and me, will lock into something, and that's when the teaching happens. The best of the koans are distillations of this happening. Sometimes it's happening in a dialogue between two people. Sometimes it's happening in a lecture of a teacher and a student. Usually there's a dialogue of some sort. And this is why I always try to foster a dialogue. When I give a talk, I know that the audience is most likely going to want to be passively receiving something. So I go in there and I start giving them entertainment. I'll tell them something funny or interesting or whatever. And then I try to open it up to questions. Now, when I gave that talk that I mentioned in Sacramento to the very unreceptive audience, I rather quickly, I think, if my memory serves, opened it up to questions. And this lady comes up and raises her hand and says, "Is there any point to this lecture, or are you just rambling?" And the fact was, I was just rambling, and there was no point. But the question I asked her and the audience is there a point to anything? Is there a point to life? It sounds like a cop-out, and maybe it was a little bit. I'm searching for something to talk to this audience about. So I'm using that as the fuel to try to get to something. But unfortunately, even that didn't work. And I felt like the whole talk just was shot down in flames, and it was terrible. I don't think anybody recorded that one, and probably for the best. That's the reason I teach. I teach so that maybe sometimes those moments will happen and real teaching will come out. It'll come out of my mouth, but it doesn't necessarily mean it comes from me, not as an individual. It comes from all of us who are in the room. And that's it. That's the whole reason. So thanks for watching. If you'd like to contribute to the continuation of my ability to carry on this experiment, there is information below this video, Patreon page, or Patreon, I'm not sure how you pronounce it, page that works now because I figured it out. There's a PayPal information, there's my blog you can go to. All of that. I really appreciate your support and your help, because that's how I buy all these cheap ass books at used bookstores all the time. So thanks a lot.